On June 10th, 2024, me and my friend headed up to Big Sur, California, where we decided to backpack up the Buckeye Trail along the Pacific Coast Highway. But before heading there, we decided to stop at Salmon Creek Falls for a short trek up to the big waterfall along the highway. That night we camped out just before the first campsite in Buckeye. But right now we're just gonna head up to Salmon Creek Falls along this short trail just off the highway. So this is a really short hike to add to the trip. It will add 0.4 miles to the trip, but it's an easy hike with little to no elevation gain. And the hike just starts right here. Right off the highway, you're gonna see the sign for Spruce Camp, which is 2 miles. And you're gonna see this trail letting you know you need a permit to camp at the campsites up ahead. But once you get on this trail, you're gonna be met with lush forestry and greenery along the trail with a lot of rocks, help guiding you up to the falls. This hike is easy to do, and you could add it to any other hike you do in Big Sur if you're doing a day hike or camping along the Pacific Coast Highway, as well as backpacking, which is what we're doing today. But as you're passing the trail, you're gonna see a right and then you're gonna see a left. We're gonna go left. And when you go left, you're gonna be met with a lot of rocks and a roaring creek, which is called Salmon Creek, leading you up to Salmon Creek Falls. And this is a very convenient hike for those who aren't big on hiking, those who just want to take it easy and they want to see a nice waterfall. And the great thing about this hike is it has these nice little pools that you can come and swim in. And up there in the waterfall, I'll show you just in a bit, there's actually a cave up there. But right now, this waterfall is flowing really well. It's flowing a lot better than the last time I was here. And I did do a video on this trail before, but I actually did the trail where I headed up to Upper Salmon Creek Falls in addition to this lower Salmon Creek. And that up there is a cave up there. Right up there, yes. So there's actually some nice little rock caves right here, which are like talus caves, and you could just climb around and inside them. And I noticed them more this time than I did last time I was here. And I noticed that every time I go back to a hike I did before, there are some things that I noticed that are different. And this is one of those things. Like, I'm sure these were here. It's just that I didn't really get a chance to really explore them. While these caves aren't the most eye-catching, they are pretty cool to explore, even though not many people will mention them. They just focus on the waterfall. But now we're gonna head up the road to Soda Springs Creek, and we're gonna hide up onto the Buckeye Trail. And there's a nice little cascade flowing waterfall right along the trail. And you do need a fire permit to camp on this trail. So when you start this hike, it starts out very steep with lots of brush, forestry, oak trees, spruce trees of many kinds. And this trail is very overgrown, so it's easy to get off the trail or miss the trail, so just keep an eye out for it. But there are several creek crossings on this trail, and you do wind around the mountain. So right now, when we get to this point right here, it actually opens up, it's more clear, and we're gonna head up that way. So right now it's very foggy, but we're gonna be above the clouds pretty soon. And you just notice all this greenery throughout the hike. The wildflowers blossoming through this area. And when you reach this sign right here, this is letting you know which way you need to go. So we actually have to go this way, past this fence. So when you see this sign right here, which is a sign I'm about to head up to, it's called Silver Peak Wilderness. We're about 2.5 miles. But instead of actually going to the first Buckeye campsite, we're actually going to go to the campsite just before Buckeye, which overlooks the ocean. And now that we're getting up further along the hike, we are above the tree line at this point. But you will merge back onto the creek along a canyon full of trees. So this is perfect if you bring a water filter and you need to fill up. There are about 3 to 4 creek crossings on this trail. I'm not sure. But right there you can see the trail where we came up through, which is pretty narrow along the mountain range. It's not really scary per se, but there are parts where you are pretty close to the edge. So just keep an eye out for your footing, as you don't want to fall down into the canyon. And just throughout the whole hike, you get beautiful, breathtaking, and astonishing views along the Pacific Coast Highway. And there's one thing to note about Big Sur, and not many people will point this out. But Big Sur is actually a part of the Los Padres National Forest. And when I tend to think of the Los Padres National Forest, I tend to think of Ojai. I tend to think of Santa Barbara. I tend to think of Montesino. I tend to think of Fraser Park and those areas, because this part of the Los Padres National Forest is pretty up north. It's almost to the point where you're heading up into the Bay Area, but not quite there. You got at least about 2 hours from here before you reach that part. But this is another creek area you could just check out right here. You have a nice little cascade flowing down through the canyon, down the mountain. And the views start to open up even more the further you get along the hike, as now we are above the clouds. But we decided to stop and take a break, as this hike was very tiring. And one of the reasons this hike was more tiring compared to my other hikes, is the fact that I was carrying 35 pounds of weight on my back. Because the majority of the time, I do day hikes, meaning I'm not carrying that extra 35 pounds on my back. I usually just carry a backpack with 3 bottles to 4 bottles of water, depending on the length of the hike, or I will carry a sandwich with me and some bars with me for the longer hikes that are around 12 miles. But at this point, you can see the Pacific Coast Highway down right there as the road starts to wind around, and you get to this corner right here where it's just nothing but brush, and then you come up through the trees. So in this hike, you're going in an area where you're exposed to the sun, and parts where you're under the trees. So those parts where you're under the trees does provide you with temporary shade until you reach your campsite. And this is the part where I actually seen a snake, but I didn't get it in the video. And we're actually getting close to our campsite. We're actually not too far from it. We have another forestry part we have to go through to actually get to it. But you can see some of the wildflowers just going throughout the trail. So this is another one of the forestry parts that I was talking about. So we are actually getting pretty close to the campsite at this point. And this is the part where we approached the campsite. We got to the campsite and there was a wooden bench right there. And so when you get to the campsite, you get these amazing views of what would be the Pacific Coast Ocean, which would be underneath those clouds. And because the clouds are covering the ocean, we can't actually see the ocean. So we decided to set up camp for the night. And if you go down that hill a little more, I'll show you in just a bit, there's actually a little house on top of a mountain. But we were actually just working on the fire. So I decided to do a short little walk along the woods, just to warm up my legs a bit. And I decided to get more views of the area. But I quickly ended up going back around and heading back to camp. This is the part where I actually turned back and went back to camp. So when I got back to the campsite, the fire was starting to go, and we decided to grill some meat for the night and have a couple cold ones. So this for me was a new experience for me. As the meat was cooking, I admired the sceneries with Juan, a friend of mine, who decided to join us along this trip. And as the meat was cooking, you could see all the clouds forming. Definitely a hike worth doing, especially if you love mountain views, you love the ocean. This is definitely one I'd recommend. And up there is where the house was on the hill I was talking about earlier. You can see it right there. So now that the food was done, we decided to have some tacos. As the sun began to go down, we settled in, decided to get some sleep for the night, because we knew the next day we had to hike back down to our car to get back home. But this was definitely an experience worth sharing. I definitely recommend the Buckeye Trail. But I definitely recommend doing this either in April when there's more water or in March when there's more water. Regardless, it's a great trail to do. It's definitely a workout if you're going to do backpacking. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed.